This is the Cereal at Midnight podcast. Hey guys, welcome back to the Cereal at Midnight podcast. My name is Heath Holland, and this is a big one for me because we're talking to Max Allan Collins. Now, I have such a huge admiration for Max Allan Collins. You know, The Road to Perdition, we think about that movie. Hopefully you've seen The Road to Perdition with Tom Hanks, Paul Newman, Jude Law, Daniel Craig. That's based on a Max Allan Collins graphic novel written for Vertigo, Vertigo under DC Comics. I think that's where I first discovered Max Allan Collins, I believe, in the 80s through DC Comics, because he was writing really interesting, smart, kind of hard-boiled characters at DC. Then 1990 arrives, Dick Tracy hits, the Warren Beatty film Dick Tracy, and I read the novelization for Dick Tracy written by Max Allan Collins. Sidebar, the man has written dozens of movie media tie-in novels. We're going to talk about that. How do you adapt a film for a novel? He's one of the kings of media tie-in novelizations. But he wrote the novelization for Dick Tracy. I was Dick Tracy mad. I was writing Dick Tracy fan fiction. Max Allan Collins also wrote some other Dick Tracy novels that were kind of ancillary, being pushed in that Dick Tracy zeitgeist, and had been writing the Dick Tracy comic strip for years. Took over after Chester Gould stopped writing that. Max Allan Collins steps up and begins writing Dick Tracy. All throughout my life, Max Allan Collins is there. Whenever I discover something, he's there. He's been writing something or creating something or making a movie about something, because he's also a filmmaker. We're going to hear about that. Leonard Maltin calling Max Allan Collins a filmmaker, and the awareness of oh yeah, I make movies now too. He is the executor of the Mickey Spillane catalog. He's finished multiple Mickey Spillane books, novels in multiple genres, not just Mike Hammer stuff, also Western stuff with the Caleb York novels. This is brought a Mickey Spillane audio productions. We got a new Mickey Spillane production called Encore for Murder that we're going to hear about here, where Gary Sandy fills those very big shoes. Gary Sandy from WKRP in Cincinnati. This is the longest interview I've ever posted to date for Cereal at Midnight. It's also the one that's the most packed. I think you're going to have an absolute blast with this. To find out Max Allan Collins would not only come and have a conversation with me, but that he's a regular viewer and he watches Cereal at Midnight. He already knew who I was. It was just crazy. This was just such a thrill, such an honor. I'm babbling because I'm so excited. Without further ado, Max Allan Collins. By the way, did you guys get slammed last night with a storm?
We got very slammed. It was not that bad when we woke up this morning. It was like, oh, they were exaggerating this. Then it started. And we're kind of like burrowed in because we kind of realized we kind of had a good time during COVID where we burrowed in and we ate at home and we didn't have to see anybody and we just watched a lot of stuff. And so we just felt like, okay, we've got about 3 or 4 days where we don't have to go anywhere and we don't have to do anything and we don't have to see anybody and we got all the food bought and we're ready to go. So.
But I think COVID forever changed everything, because it told us all these things you were doing, you don't have to do. You're fine at home. I don't think theaters are ever going to recover all the way.
I don't think they are either. And our big, the one thing we did was there was for seniors at 7:00 in the morning, you could go to the local big grocery store and there'd be nobody there but seniors for about an hour, and they'd be playing they wouldn't be playing country western, they'd be playing Bobby Rydell and and all that kind of stuff. And we just had that was our big deal. Once a week we would go to the store and for an hour we'd hear, really old rock and roll from when we were in junior high.
Oh, do you follow Bear Family Records? Because they put out.
I do to some degree. In fact, my guy, as you may have picked up from reading my books, is Bobby Darin. I'm a huge. Since I was like 11 or 12 years old. There's a cool guy singing about a guy who's a serial killer. I love this. That was me as a kid. If you look in the background here, you can see that's laser discs, and that was kind of the middle shelf is a laser disc from that era where they were putting out all the live concerts and all of the golden oldies stuff, and that whole thing is what one of the reasons I keep my Laserdisc player alive, is because that's where the music, it really was, no one talks about it, a golden age of music on disc, on video disc.
Elaborate. I've never heard anybody talk about this. Please elaborate on
Oh
that.
well, it'll be a Three Dog Night concert. It'll be, it'll be the golden hits of the '50s, and it will be clips from different shows, and it will be, and it's anybody that was big, all of the new wave stuff, lots of Elvis Costello, lots of Blondie, all of that stuff, and it kept going into the early '90s. So from about whenever Laserdisc started, which was I think late '70s, that's a real interesting period of music. You will see things like it's Talking Heads, and it's
Mm.
all kinds of wonderful stuff. Iron Butterfly. Okay, there's no Iron Butterfly DVD that I know of. There's certainly not
No.
a Blu-ray, and a lot of Beatles. There was I forget what it was called, but it was the thing that was before Anthology, that was the thing that was you had to have, because that was the Beatles thing that had the most.
Was it the complete Beatles?
Yes, I don't think that ever got. Yeah,
Compleat. Yeah.
I don't think that ever got on to DVD.
It stopped at VHS.
Well, no, it didn't. It stopped at Laserdisc.
There, yeah.
and,
And it's
and
good too. That's a really good documentary.
yeah, and it's still a pretty good format. Now, if you can't see it because I've got my blue Christmas poster in front of it, but
Nice.
there's a tube TV behind there, because that's the way to watch Laserdisc. It wants, it wants the tube TV. It wants that vacuum tube, and it looks good.
So I
And
have to ask, as I hear what you're saying, I agree with what you're saying. As a physical media fan, which we see
Mhm.
it all behind you, what do you think about this trend right now of the why no 4K people? It's these younger people that are just entering and they expect the absolute best quality for everything.
Well, and this is something I've wrestled with, because I like the best quality of everything. Where's my Chinatown 4K? I
Yeah.
mean, the movies I want now. We've got Vertigo on 4K.
Road to Perdition. Where's the
Road to
4K for
Perdition
that?
isn't on 4K yet, which I don't understand. It was the best picture cinematography. Conrad Hall. How do you beat Conrad Hall? But I do find I have I guess it must be about a 60-inch screen. I've got one of those that kind of has a curve to it,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
and it is it does take 4K, but the difference between 4K and Blu-ray on sort of a normal, what I think of as a normal flat screen, it's not radical.
Yeah.
I will upgrade if I really love the movie. But now we're back to what we were talking about off camera, which is that I gear because of my age, partly, and because funds are not unlimited for any of us, I will upgrade something I love. If I love it or really, really like it. I would love a 4K of How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying, for example. One of my favorite movies. The Robert Morris performance in How to Succeed in Business is one of the great Broadway performances captured by accurately by a movie. And so something like that. I mentioned Chinatown. I'd also like the Two Jakes with 4K. So it isn't always
Yeah.
something really, really famous. It's just, and I think collectors have to give in to what they personally like. For example, I I have bought my last Jesse Franco movie. I'm not going to get conned into buying a Jesse Franco movie again. And I did buy The Girl from Rio because it was on 4K,
Yeah.
but that's because I like Fu Manchu,
Well,
and
that's my favorite one too. Is my favorite Franco film is The Girl from Rio, and it's got that cool like bossa nova kind of thing going on.
it's got everything but a story.
It, yep, yep.
And I had a lot of trouble for years with with the Italian stuff, and I think not the westerns. The westerns, I saw many of those in the theater. And if it had Lee Van Cleef in it, I was going to be there.
Oh
There's
yeah.
no question I was going to be there. But the Giallo, uh, and I saw this. I saw somebody smart define this the wrong way the other day. Maybe it was you. I don't think it was though. The reason why they're called the yellow film, which is Giallo, is that the paperback line that published all the American authors in translation had yellow covers.
Mm.
I have a couple of those. A couple of my books were published over there in the 70s. So it isn't that the yellow was somehow some other way associated with, with dark material. It was literally like the Black Mask magazine, Black Mask, but it was
Hmm.
literally they had a yellow kind of frame to a little pulp illustration, and that's why they made the movies out of those books, and that's why it's called that. And I had some trouble getting into that. I had some trouble getting into Argento and some of these people because they really are more about the way they look and the moods that they create than any kind of logical story. And I'm just
Yeah.
linear enough as a writer myself that I had to kind of get past that. But I came to it. It did not come to me.
Yeah.
I had to get past a couple of, I guess, prejudices because to get into some of the foreign material and some of the kind of art house material, you have to put some of your pulp rules behind.
Some of them are good. Some of them I'll probably never watch again because they are form over. It's just,
Yeah,
it's just like,
form over
what can we
content.
do with what we've got?
But I have to tell you that when I started making, there was a period, and we're kind of jumping around here, which is fine. But I did the Dick Tracy comic strip from '77 to '93, and basically that was a ticket for me to be able to do my novels because I would only take me a day or two a week to do the Dick Tracy comic strip. And so I had a nice paycheck for that. So I could kind of take my time. And that's when I developed the Nathan Heller novels. And I did a lot of work during that period. When that was over, they basically fired me. I mean, I'm pretty open
Yeah.
about that. But very common thing in publishing is a new editor comes in and gets rid of the other guy's, you know, pet. And I was the pet of the other guy who he was hired to replace. So, that's the way it goes.
Yeah.
But I had a 15-year run, and I was the first guy in after Chester Gould, who created Dick Tracy. So that was a dream gig for a kid. I mean, I was in my early 20s when I got it. And then in '93, I got this notion to try to do some independent filmmaking because I loved movies. I liked movies as much as I liked books. And that's when I did Mommy, which is basically was Patty McCormick reviving the Bad Seed as a
Right here.
essentially, yeah,
Here it is, right here.
there it is. There she is. She's a great human being, great actress. And we did two of those, and then I got the bug. You get the bug for things. It's
Yeah.
like rock and roll. I've played rock and roll since, you ready for this? 1965. I've played rock and roll, and I still am. I have 3 gigs this summer.
It's amazing.
So I love it. I mean, why should I not do the things that I love to do? But what happened was I got involved in the independent film, and we did a couple that were really low budget, and they were really when I say low budget, I mean $10,000. I mean
Micro budget, is that fair to say?
micro budget,
Yeah.
but I had a producer steal a bunch of money from us. We did well with the two mommies, and I had and the money was stolen from us, and I wanted to keep going, so we figured out I would figure out a way to do something. We shot real time Siege at Lucas Street Market on security cameras, basically, and we did Elliot Ness and Untouchable Life. We staged it as a play, and I at
I've got
that
that
time I
here
was,
too.
yes, I was kind of hot because of the fact that Road to Perdition had been out, so I went
Yeah.
to this theater in Des
Were you
Moines.
not hot before that though, with all of your fiction?
Well, I mean, I've had things optioned, but Road to Perdition was a big deal. I mean,
Yeah.
that was a big deal, and so I went
We'll
into
circle back around to some of this because I got a lot that I want to say, but
okay.
I want to let you get your point out.
Well, the point is that I was able to make that movie for $10,000 because we got a grant from Humanities Iowa, and I went to this theater in Des Moines that was the big repertory theater there, and said, I'm the Road to Perdition guy. You want to do my new play? Oh, we love your play. Okay, but I need the theater for between the weekend performances.
Yeah.
So we shot it in like 4 days, and it's a one-man show. The late Michael Cornelison, who was a wonderful actor, and it's so there's a lot of scrambling just to find a way to do it. I did two documentaries, one with the University of Iowa that was about V.T. Hamlin, the guy who drew the alley oop comic strip, the caveman,
Mm-hmm.
and then I did the Mickey Spillane documentary that I think you've seen.
This documentary, is this the
That
one you're referring to?
documentary. I mean, and then at a certain point, one of the things was my friend Michael Cornelison, who had been an actor in all of my movies, and had done the voiceover. He passed away, and it took the wind out of my sails.
Yeah.
And also, I was getting older, so well then, as I think we can go into this separately, but we did the Mike Hammer Encore for Murder as a play, and I basically shot that, and then it kind of got the juices flowing again. So I as you know, I just did a movie this year at a ripe old age, which we won't talk about.
You
And
keep bringing it up though.
I know I'm a little obsessed with it. It's it does define what you can do, but
Does it?
I like to. And this one we had all we did it on 14 grand. Uh,
Which
but
is unbelievable. I mean, that is unbelievable. When you told me that, I was like, wow. Because here's the thing, I talk about people send me their micro budget movies. Most micro budget movies don't have a story. People want to make a movie and they don't have the budget to make a movie, and so they just kind of film whatever they can. It is a true adaptation of we're talking about. You want to talk about the name of it? I don't. Did you say
well,
the
the
name of it?
movie is called Blue Christmas. It was um, that's kind of an interesting story. I wouldn't mind telling you.
Go for
Uh,
it. Yeah.
I on in 1992, toward the end of the year, I received a letter telling me my services were no longer needed on Dick Tracy, the comic strip, after 15 years in the movie with Warren Beatty and all of that stuff. And I called my agent and said, "Well, you need to know the bottom dropped out of my, this thing that has allowed me to do all kinds of fun things." And he said, "Well, I this is a terrible thing for me to have to tell you, but your Nathan Heller contract was canceled today." So I had the two big things I had. Nathan Heller was is my recurrent, one of the two recurring characters I write about a lot. And then, so basically I lost everything.
Yeah.
And it was like right before Thanksgiving. And so I had about a month where was as close to writer's block as I ever get, and I don't get writer's block. So I've always liked the Alistair Sim Scrooge, and I've always loved Christmas Carol. And on Christmas Eve, 1992, an idea popped in my mind, which was two of my favorite things: the Maltese Falcon and A Christmas Carol. I could see how they could be merged.
Mm-hmm.
You have the partner who has died, who's been murdered, and the private eye. Sam Spade reluctantly solves his murder. He didn't like the guy, but your partner's dead, and the private eye business, you gotta
Yeah.
do it. You gotta solve the murder. Well, I just made that Marley, the Marley ghost. A year ago, I was killed, and now I'm now I'm walking through limbo, chained up because you, my private detective partner in the business, did not bother to solve my murder. And so I thought, that's a really good idea. And so I sat down and and you'll appreciate this because you're a writer, I wrote a 50-page novella that night. I wrote almost all night. I wrote on it, and then I sold it a few times, and it's been collected here and there. But I felt it felt very special to me.
Mm-hmm.
It was what brought me back into to be able to tap into my creativity after getting hit really hard with those two things right before Christmas. And so we when we did mommy was a pretty successful. I know not all horror fans like it because it's not it's really a psychological thriller. But I live in a little town. If I had thrown blood on the walls around here, I wouldn't have got my investors, right? I had to you have to do what you have to do to get
That's right.
something made. And so mommy sold to Lifetime and was a primetime movie of the week. Mommy was picked up by the Blockbuster chain, which was a big deal at that point to be
Yeah.
in every Blockbuster. And so we decided, and I had written a movie version of A Wreath for Marley. And that was what we were going to do. We had done location scouting, we'd done everything on it. And I said, we better make Mommy too. We just better. I mean, we have to. And I had an idea for it. So, because I had this idea that we would make her the hero of the second movie. She was the villain of the first one, so I'd make
Mm-hmm.
her the hero of the second movie. I thought that was fun. I didn't know if
Yeah.
anybody had ever done that. So, Blue Christmas, Wreath for Marley, got put on a shelf, and then I always kind of would come back to it, but I couldn't ever figure out a way to make it that wouldn't cost me at least $500,000. And then when we did this Mike Hammer play last year, and I started thinking more in play terms, I thought of a way to do it as a play. And then as I started working on that, I thought, but it could also rather and then shoot it as a play. And then I thought, but I'd really rather make a movie. So then the play version, which I'd rethought so it could all be done on one set, let's just shoot it as a movie instead,
Mm-hmm.
which we did, and we did it in six days. And then we had I think 2 or 3 evenings of second unit where we shot some exteriors and things, but mostly I wanted it all to be almost like you're locked in the private eye's mind.
Mm-hmm.
And so every vision comes, and we just played the set. And I think we did a good job. And
You did do a good job. You
well,
did.
it's a lot of bang for the buck. Now, when I
It
say
is.
$14,000, I didn't get paid as a director. I didn't get paid as a writer. My producer didn't get paid. My cinematographer didn't get paid. The actors were all pretty much local people.
Yeah.
So if we had paid everybody, it would have been a $250,000 movie, which is still chump change, but I don't have $250,000 laying around. But you mentioned something really key. All these people, and I don't mean to disparage them, who say, "Well, I'm a filmmaker. I'm a filmmaker." Well, have you made any films? Well, that opportunity hasn't presented itself to me yet. Well, here's how opportunity presents itself to you as a filmmaker. You grab it. You can't get in the door, you go through the window. And you have to will these movies into existence. And it's the only way you can do it. And now I've done like as a side gig, I've done 6 feature movies. It's not too bad. And 2 documentaries and 3 shorts. So I remember the first time that Leonard Maltin said to me, "Well, you're a filmmaker," and I said, "Does I'm a filmmaker?" He said, "Yeah, you're a filmmaker. It doesn't
Yeah.
mean you're good, bad, indifferent, but the only way you can call yourself a filmmaker as if you've made a film. I mean, that's kind of how the English language works, although it's working in weird ways these days. But
Yeah. Well, do you know how many YouTubers call themselves filmmakers on their tax returns? I'm like, it not really. You're not really filmmaking. You're doing something else. But
make a
yeah, that's
movie on, make a movie on YouTube, but make a movie. I
yeah,
mean, come on. When we made Mommy, we had to make the hard decision to not shoot it on film and to shoot it on Betacam,
hmm
because by shooting it on Betacam, we were able to get Patty McCormick, Jason Miller, we got from The Exorcist, we got Majel Barrett from Star Trek, we got Brink Stevens, the great Scream Queen, we got Mickey Spillane, my friend, the mystery
who we're
writer.
gonna talk more about in the yeah,
So by shooting on Betacam, we were able to get these, get some names in, which you needed on the video box in those days. You
right.
had to have video box names. And so I look at these people and I'm thinking, you've got a phone. You've got HD in your phone. Make a
hmm
movie.
Yeah.
I mean, uh, the tools, and you can, like, one of the things that we're doing right now with Blue Christmas is we're talking to a major theater chain in Iowa about putting us in next Christmas. We
Wow.
couldn't do that with we couldn't do that with Mommy because it was the wrong format. But now everybody's HD, everybody's 4K,
Yeah.
and so there's a whole new world that's starting to open up. And I'm glad I'm here for at least a little bit of it, because it's really, the idea that I'm going to get to see Blue Christmas in an actual theater. It's very
Is
exciting.
that when people will get to see this? Because I know right now it's not. I mean, I've seen it. Thank you, by the way. Thank you for letting me see it. But
You're the
how are
first person
people?
to see it. You're the first civilian to see it.
eh, and I loved it. And people will find out. I can I say I gave a pull quote for it, or I gave
You did
a
give a
blurb.
pull quote
I
for
gave
it,
a blurb. Yeah.
which is
Um,
very nice.
when can people expect? We just talked about this film. When can people expect to see it? Christmas time, 2024.
Well, yeah, I think probably that's going to be the case. I'm actually talking to our friend Bob Blair
Bob Blair.
from
Yeah.
VCI. Has said he wants to do it,
Did
and
you ever think about shooting it in black and white?
I did. In fact, the original screenplay was going to start in black and white and bleed into to color,
hmm
but we just it just didn't play the way I wanted it to. But I mean, that's funny because I know they've got, what, the Godzilla movie is being screened in black and white, and of course they did that with the most recent Mad Max movie.
Mad Max. They also did it with Logan, the Wolverine movie. There's a black and white version of that on the disc release, I think. I was just curious if that was something you'd
No,
considered because
but I had to actually talk to my cinematographer about this quite a bit, because um he kept saying, "Well, it's not very noir," and I'm like, "This is a
what?
Christmas movie. This is a Christmas movie first. It's noir second." But we did a black and white noir 5-minute film, and did all of the angles, and did everything that is, I hate the word trope, but the tropes, the
Yeah.
cliches or whatever. And I do think if you lean too heavily into that, it's distracting, and it becomes it becomes a self-parody.
Well, I want to ask you, what did you think about Sin City, the film version of Sin City when it first came out? Because we hadn't seen anything like it before.
Well, yeah, and it's funny because I think that they kind of had worn their welcome out by the second one, but it was a unique. I liked the idea that they took Frank's work,
Mhm.
and it was a comic book on
Yeah.
screen. My biggest complaint about Sin City generally, and Frank Miller's a friend of mine, not a close friend, but we know each other. He did the cover of the first Mike Danger comic book for us. So he's a good guy, but Sin City is almost entirely derived from Mickey Spillane. And even at the end when he thanked all these people and all his and all his influences, he left Mickey off. And I thought, come on, Frank, Mickey's there's no Sin City without Mickey Spillane. And the sad thing is, as you know, you can say Mickey Spillane to a generation or two, and they don't know what you're talking about.
Right. I
But
was
he
gonna say
was
if it was a modern filmmaker who didn't think Mickey Spillane, you could say, well, they don't know that all of this saturation of these elements in our culture comes from Mickey Spillane. But
Well,
Frank
I'll
Miller
tell you,
absolutely knew.
Quentin Tarantino knows. You can
Yeah, he
bet
does.
Quentin Tarantino knows, and he has said so. I believe he has a "Kiss Me Deadly" poster in his office. And if you think about "Kiss Me Deadly," it does not really have the earmarks of classic noir in terms of the way things are lit.
Yeah.
Uh, Whereas "I the Jury," which I have you seen the "I the Jury"?
Yes,
Uh,
absolutely I have.
yeah, well, I was
It's beautiful. Yeah. It's
very that was a dream come true for me that came to be. I mean, this is a dream that this 3D, 4K, classic. I mean, a classic flicks.
mhm.
What an incredible company.
They're doing some of the best and most important restoration work of anybody right now.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
these noir films. They just put out a Loretta Young movie on Blu-ray, and they're restoring all 66 of the Hopalong Cassidy films, which is a huge
Wow.
undertaking. So I
Yeah,
love those guys. Yeah, David.
Mickey personally did not like any of those movies, and that's why he made the Girl Hunters, because he's going to show them how it was done. And the funny thing is that as the years went by, well, another short anecdote.
Okay.
We There was a Mickey Spillane festival basically at the British Film Institute in London, and that's one of the places we showed my documentary Mike Hammer's Mickey Spillane, and it was shown there at the British Film Institute. So they also had I the Jury in 3D. They had the Girl Hunters. They had Kiss Me Deadly, obviously, and they had the pilot, the Brian Keith pilot, which I provided for this release of I the Jury.
You
Brian
had that?
Keith,
That's from you had that? The
that was
elements
mine.
for that?
Yeah, that was, and I did the commentary
Yeah.
on that as well. So it was a big event, and we had an interview with me and Mickey and a guy whose name I can't remember, but an incredibly erudite guy from the British Film Institute. And for once in my life, you will not believe this, but I shut up. I didn't say anything. And I just sat there because he had Mickey Spillane he's talking to. Let's let him talk to Mickey Spillane. But this gentleman knew me and knew that I knew a lot about Mickey. And he turned to me and he said, "Now, Max, I understand you and Mickey have one thing that you really disagree on." And I knew exactly what he was talking about. I said, "Yes, I believe Mickey hates the movie Kiss Me Deadly, and I think it's a masterpiece." And then I went on with my theory that the great writers of noir fiction who have lasted, who have endured, are the ones who had great movies done from their books. So Chandler benefits from Murder My Sweet and The Big Sleep being such terrific movies. Um, James M. Cain benefits from Postman Always Rings Twice and Double Indemnity, and I think that a real good case can be made for Stanley Gardner having a real debt to Raymond Burr, for example,
Yeah.
and Christie made a big comeback because of the movies that were done, the wonderful movies that were done, and the TV show with David Suchet. And I said, and Mickey is going to be in the pantheon in part because Kiss Me Deadly is a great movie, and that will keep people coming back to that book and to his books. And I saw, and he was turning, just looking at me. And I
Spillane
could
was?
just, yeah, and I could just see the wheels turning. And the next time he was interviewed, who was the best screen Mike Hammer? And he said, well, of course, Stacy on TV, and Darren McGavin was good. Uh, but in the movies, Ralph Meeker, the star of Kiss Me Deadly.
Yeah, did you guys talk about? Did he talk to you about this after what you said?
Mm,
No.
no, he said, well, next to me, of course, because he had played in the Girl. but
Unbelievable.
but he, so I turned him around on Kiss Me Deadly,
Yeah.
and and he also didn't like Either Jury, which I kind of don't understand because it's pretty darn faithful considering the source material.
And the time at which it was made were the things that you couldn't necessarily do on camera.
Right. I mean, there's a house of prostitution that is passed off as a dance studio
Yeah.
and stuff like that, and the crimes there don't make any. I mean, the mystery sort of doesn't add up to anything, but boy, does it feel like a
Right.
paperback from 1952. It's just great.
You should tell people that don't know. I mean, first of all, we do want them to watch the
Oh
documentary,
yeah,
but but you became really close to Mickey Spillane to the point. Aren't you the executor of basically his catalog?
yeah. I've done finished 13 or 14 Mike Hammer novels that he began and didn't finish. They and I've done, I think, three others that were non-Mike Hammers. So ever since about 2007, I've been every year done at least one Mike Hammer.
I pulled this from my collection
Oh
because
yeah.
it's out of what we normally talk about. This is Western stuff, and I wanted to highlight that.
Well,
There's a series of these.
that is a screenplay that he wrote for John Wayne. They were very good friends. Um, and I ended up writing a whole series of it. Only the first book is a novelization of his screenplay, but that's just a funny thing about publishing because I was sitting at a BoucherCon, which is the big mystery writers convention and mystery fan convention, with an editor, friend of mine, and said, you know what, they were saying to me, oh, this is interesting what you're doing with my Hammer novels. I said, well, I have a Western script movie script by Spillane, because I knew they published westerns, a lot of westerns, and this editor, a woman named Michaela Hamilton, that's all I told her was. She said, "Can you do three?" And I said, "Well, there's only one script, but I can do two more if you want me to." And so we did, I think, six or seven Caleb York westerns, and I've loved westerns, and I'm a big western fan,
Yeah.
and to get the chance at this late stage of my career to get to do some western novels, uh, and it was just a real treat. I love doing those books. I love doing those books.
You're everywhere in all genres. So Dick Tracy for me was this huge event, right? I was coming out of Batman in 1989,
Sure.
and into Dick Tracy 1990. It was huge for me. I read the novelization, and I knew you from that Dick Tracy novelization. I knew you from DC Comics of the post-crisis, the later 80s, like 87, 88. And
Did you read
that's what
Ms.
I knew.
Tree? How about Ms. Tree?
Not when I was a kid, not yet. I discovered that a little bit later. Um, and then over the years, everywhere I would go, like all these, whatever I would gravitate to, there you were. You had planted a flag in that particular thing. And so, you say something. I don't want to. I'm not sure if this is a direct quote, but in the Spillane documentary, you talk about how he called you, and it was such a surreal moment for you because you're like, yeah, I'm talking to Mickey Spillane. That's how I feel talking to
Yeah.
you
Oh
because
well.
you created so much of the escape, the things that I escaped into. You were a huge part of my formative years, and now as an adult to get to enjoy Quarry and the many things, Western work and stuff like that, because I've just lately gotten more into Westerns. There you are. I mean, it's all these different things that you've been able to do. So first I just want to say thank you for that, because you are one of the architects of not just my childhood but the last 30 years of my life, really.
Well, I did something very sneaky, and that was when I lost Dick Tracy. as a comic strip where I was scripting it. I had had this 1990, the novelization, which was very popular, it sold 1 million copies.
Wow.
So I went to my agent when everything had dropped out and said, please put the word out to the not to the movie tie-in people at the various publishers that I'm available. And so nothing happened for a few months maybe, and I got a call from my agent, and he said, I've got good news and bad news. I said, let's go with the good news. He said, the good news is they want you to write the novelization of the new Clint Eastwood movie, and I had just seen Forgiven, which was a masterpiece. And and I said, well, I'm a big Clint Eastwood fan, going back to the Italian Westerns. Absolutely. He said, here's the bad part. You've got to deliver it in 8 days. And also, I was set to go to on day 6 of that, I was set to go to the Comic-Con in San Diego. I had tickets and plane tickets, and my band, Seduction of the Innocent, was going to play there. My band with Miguel Ferrer, Bill Mumy, Steve Lealoa, Chris Christensen. And I say my band. They probably all each say my band, but God
And that's
bless you.
all true. Everybody gets to
Yeah.
claim it.
And so my wife and I, and the internet was really not a thing at that point. And so she did the research for me, and it was a story in the line of fire. They go from city to city to city following this assassin. And so she would go and research, I don't know, Cincinnati or whatever, and come back to me, well, here's some stuff you could work in about this town. Anyway, I did it. And the funny thing is, when we listened to the talking book of it, the audio book, you could just the amount of swearing in it just kept increasing and increasing and increasing. And I said, that's me. As the character's having a nervous breakdown, I was having my nervous breakdown. And the book worked really well. And so the word got around, hey, he's good and he's fast, which is not necessarily the best thing to have people know, but
Yeah.
whatever attracts clients is good. And at the same time, I had just resold the Nathan Heller series to Dutton, and they said to me, "Now look, you're prolific. We do not want you writing anything else but Nathan Heller. And you can do a pseudonym thing if you want to, but keep it deep, deep cover." And so when this came up, I called my editor, said, what about novelizations of movies and TV? Oh, that doesn't count. Don't worry about that. So for about 15 years, I was one of the key novelization guys in the country. Lee Goldberg and I started the Association of International Association of Media and Tie-in Writers, and so I got to do a lot of really great things, and I got to do some things that weren't that great but were interesting to me. I mean, I did Saving Private Ryan, obviously In the Line of Fire, American Gangster, U571, and so. But
Then you
I
do
also
Wind Talkers too.
I did Wind Talkers, John
Yeah.
Woo movie. When I saw I
Yeah.
could do a John Woo movie, it's like, okay, we'll have to put some flying birds
Yeah.
in it.
How do you write this right here, the sideways ballet, the gun ballet?
I know. We just watched Face Off again the other night on 4K. I did buy a 4K
Yeah.
of that. But at any rate, what I liked about it was that I got to do a lot of genres that they wouldn't think of me for. I got to do war novel. I got to do Western. I did Maverick, and Maverick was my favorite TV show. I actually did a thing in Maverick where I did it in first person because some of those Maverick shows with James Garner had a voiceover, and I also buried the lyrics of the theme song, so that by the time you got to the end of the book, if you were a fan, you'd realize I'd said "Riverboat Ring Your Bell" or whatever it was. They all were spread through the whole book. Then I
Wow.
got to do U.S. Marshals, which was the sequel to The Fugitive, and
It's a
I
good movie.
loved The Fugitive as a
Yeah.
kid. so I had all these opportunities. Then I got to do Scorpion King, and I got to do, I did Waterworld, science fiction. And so I was in all of these different genres, and I got to, learn how to do those genres, bring my enthusiasm for those different genres, to bear. And sometimes it would be something like Scorpion King. It was not exactly a great script. And so I looked at it, and one thing you have to do is you have to find a win. If you're going to do a novelization, for me, I had to find again, if I can't go through the door, I've got to go through the window. I've got to find something about that material that I can latch onto. If it's a John Woo movie, that's easy. But Scorpion King and The Rock was nobody yet.
It
I
was
mean,
the eyebrow. The gateway was the eyebrow.
yeah, and he had been in, and I had done the Mummy movies. I had done the Mummy books, which again, that was got to do Universal horror kind
Yeah.
of, and Indiana Jones at the same time.
Hmm.
So I had a wonderful time writing those books. And with the Scorpion King, I looked at it and I thought, Edgar Rice Burroughs. I'll do Edgar
Yeah.
Rice Burroughs. And so I did, because I loved him growing up. So it was all about, I'm all about enthusiasm. And I think I would try to find something I could be enthusiastic about. Now, the funniest one was my agent called me and said, they have this movie called Daylight they want you to do the novelization of. And send me the script, and I read it, and I said, this is terrible. I don't want anything to do with this. Is that okay? Can we get away with turning this down? And I had turned the last two down. And he said, you can turn it down, but you'll never get offered one again. Okay. So I studied the thing. And if you remember that movie, that's about this tunnel. It's a disaster movie.
Yeah.
So what I did was I wrote I wrote it like it was a documentary, and I did six or seven points of view, first person points of view of the survivors. And I never wrote a chapter about the lead character who was played by Stallone. You had to pick it up through the other people that were there, and it I didn't ask permission to do it either, and I thought I could really get in trouble, but they loved it, and they did a full cast audio of it. And I hear about that every now and then, that it was my best novelization. So that's being a professional. As far as I'm concerned, you have this project that you think is terrible, and then you find a way to do it anyway.
Yeah.
So I'm real proud of that. That's probably the best novelization I ever did. But the punchline of this is,
Okay.
and there is one, is that my agent did not want me to put my name on any of the novelizations. And I said, why would I not want my name on Saving Private Ryan?
Hmm.
And why would I not want my name on something that's going to be seen, a movie that's going to be seen by the ones that aren't hits are going to be seen by millions of people? And so I said, no, my name's going on. And the other thing is that a lot of kids, and by kids I mean junior high and high school kids, read novelizations, and they did at that time because we didn't have this physical media.
Right.
And so I said, I want those. If you get somebody as a reader when they're young, like you were, Keith,
Yeah.
if you get them when you're young, you can hold on to them, and they will stick with you, and they will
Do you
read.
know who else just said, I was doing so Gene Autry said that very same thing. I was watching
Is that
some Gene
right?
Autry movies, and so in the 80s, he had a Melody Time Theater. It was like, what Joe Bob Briggs does for
Yeah, yeah.
his show, that wraparounds, that kind of thing. He had that it was on the Nashville network, which I guess became TNN, which I think became Spike TV. Long story short, he had one of his co-stars from a 1935 film on, and she said, you told me back in 1935, get them when they're young and they'll stay with you through their whole life. So you're in good company. You're up there with Gene
Oh,
Autry.
that's pretty good. That's
Yeah.
that's very, very good. And I look at it that way. So it was a learning experience to be able to, because when you're like me, a mystery writer or a science fiction writer or a Western writer, you will be typed just like like an actor will be typed. So nobody wanted me. If I would pitch a science fiction idea, it would be rejected because no, stick to what you know, stick to what they know you as. And so the fact that I was able to do all these different kinds of movie novels, I got to flex muscles and I got to learn things that I, had never had the opportunity to learn. And so because I had done, Maverick, when they came to me to do the Caleb York novels from the Mickey Spillane material, I wasn't like, oh my God, can I write a Western? No, I'd already written a Western.
You already
It's
done
not a
it.
problem. And so, so that's that story. And that was a period of my career for about 15 years. And a lot of people came on board, which was really, really good in that period. I mean, the thing I'm proudest of are the Nathan Heller books and probably Quarry. And Quarry is another wild story because of the fact that it is a thing I did in college. I started it in college. So one of the first things I sold, it ran 4 books, done. And then the years pass and the fan mail about the Quarry novels continues. Quarry is a hitman, a Vietnam vet who becomes a hitman, as I think you know. So that happens. Gradually, I'm like, this doesn't seem like he's going away. So I would write an occasional short story about him, just to kind of keep him there and keep him in my mind. Then when Charles R. Dye started Hard Case Crime, this wonderful line of retro noir paperbacks, uh, he reprinted a couple of my Nolan books and came back to me and said, what should we reprint next? They had just started and they were basically doing reprints of people like Earl Stanley Gardner and so on. And I said, why just give me the money that you would have given me for the reprint and let me do an original, because I what you're doing is right up my alley. Let me do this. And so I ended up doing a book called The Last Quarry that was designed to be the finally to end the series. And something very odd happened. It was successful. And I didn't, that was the one thing I wasn't anticipating. It was successful. We got reviewed in Entertainment Weekly. And
Why did you not think, were you surprised that it was successful?
I'm always surprised when anything's successful. And I think the reason for that is, I mean, I've been doing this a long, long time. And I've never had the last real job I had other than a short teaching job was bagging groceries. Okay. So this has all been about avoiding a real job. My whole
Yeah.
career is about avoiding a real job. And every time you finish one, you're like, what is there going to be another one? Is there going to be another one? And so it's always been that way. And I'd had a lot of movie options without any movies getting made.
Yeah.
And that's good. The money comes in. You get a $2,000 check or something. Then Road to Perdition happens, and the Quarry TV show happens, and that's now I got something I can put on the cover of the book by the author of Road to Perdition. And but I still get rejected. I mean, all writers get oh yeah, you bet. Well,
Really?
particularly in this
I
climate.
need names and
Well,
addresses.
I mean, if you think an old white guy can easily get published in this climate, it's just not. It's a lot of the stuff that you and I love is not universally loved by a couple of generations.
Well,
Oh,
that's
that's the
what
case.
it's our responsibility. It's my responsibility. I won't obligate you because you're doing the work. It's my responsibility to make sure that the younger generations are discovering this stuff, and that if they don't know who Quarry is, I got a video talking about Hard Case Crime here, and it turned a lot of people on to Hard Case Crime. If they don't know about it, and if the peer group that they hang out with isn't talking about it, where are they going to find this stuff out? That's why I make videos about Gene Autry or whatever, is because if you don't know about it, how can you find out if something's cool? It's these crime novels, and not just crime, but all the work that you've done over the years is fantastic. You have become the Spillane for my generation, like you have taken up that mantle, right?
Well, I
Um,
try. I mean, we this all connects. I'm gonna do a segue for you now,
okay.
and that
I like that you're producing. This is good.
segue is Audie Murphy, because my Quarry character, in part, was based on Audie Murphy, who was the most decorated soldier of World War II and was just a kid, basically.
Yeah.
And I had a very good friend uh, whose name was John McCrae, who was funny, one of the gang, and he went all over and went to Vietnam and did several tours and had a harrowing experience over there and came back a little damaged. And he and Audie Murphy were the basis of the Quarry character. And interestingly, the creator of Rambo, David Morrell,
Hmm.
had done the same thing. He actually taught at the University of Iowa for a while, so we would bump into each other in Iowa City. And we both would talk about the fact that we both had based our our characters on Audie Murphy. Because and Murphy, if you read about him, he had some. I mean, he really had some serious post traumatic stress
Yeah.
syndrome. Uh, there was one story I read about him where he was speeding through, I don't know, Beverly Hills or something, and a cop pulled him over and got out of the car and looked into the car, and there was Audie Murphy sitting there, and there was a 45 automatic on the seat next to him, and he supposedly said, "I'm sorry to do this, Mr. Murphy. I just wanted to tell you I'm a big fan." And then he went back to his his vehicle and just watched Murphy speed off. Because if you're with Audie Murphy and he's got a 45,
Yeah.
you probably want to do whatever Audie Murphy wants you to do. And also there was a thing where he was at a football game, and somebody started really giving him a bad some mob guy started giving him a really bad time. Oh, you're not so tough, blah blah blah. And he said, I killed 100 of you guys in Sicily. One more isn't going to make a difference. And the guy just scooted. So there's something about Murphy that he conveys in those movies.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I find, and I know you're a fan, but one of the things that I notice a lot when I see these is it almost feels like a lot of the cast around him is overacting because they feel like, well, there's this amateur here who became a movie star because he was in Life magazine, and he needs our help. Meanwhile, he's understating everything, and it's the by far the best performance in any one of his movies. And sometimes they're almost making fools out of themselves. They're so overcompensating for somebody who doesn't need any help.
Yeah.
It was like when Laurence Olivier acted with Marilyn Monroe and Prince and the Showgirl, and he thought, well, she's not doing anything, until he saw the dailies and he realized, oh my lord, she's wiping the floor the floor with me. So, but let me ask you, what drew you to Audie Murphy?
Uh, the authenticity, I think. Um, the I'm still there. A lot of these westerns I'm still kind of getting to for the first time because I didn't
Yeah.
grow up with them. And so when I see something like an Audie Murphy western, there is it's that intensity. I mean, what is the movie? Is it Quantrill's Raiders? I'm trying to remember if that's the title of it. He's in a movie about Quantrill's
It's
Raiders.
the one with Brian Donlevy, I think.
Right. And there's a scene in that movie where this guy kind of confronts him and they have this fight, and Murphy just he's got this like big knife, and he just like starts stabbing the guy. It's off camera, you can't really see it, but I'm like, well, I don't know that I've seen that level of violence and that level of intensity, because I mean it's in his eyes, right? In a movie like this. And there's other the thing that bothers me is that people say 50s westerns are safe and they're tame and they are
Oh,
saccharine, and I'm like, Have you watched any of them? Because they're the exact opposite of that. The 50s are the purest form of.
Well, the first movies, the first westerns I saw, other than what was on TV when the craze started, um, they were the Randolph Scott, Bud Bedecker
Oh my
movies.
goodness. Yeah.
I've seen those. I'm like, I don't know, 8 years old, seeing these in the theater, and I was seeing The Searchers in the theater when I was a little kid, and I was
Yeah.
seeing, well, Murphy, no name on the bullet,
Yeah.
which is, and what's interesting too about these collections that the great Kino is doing, what a line these people have is he's got some damn good directors working with him.
Yeah.
Uh, Bud Bedecker again is a director who works with him. Don Siegel, you don't get better than Don Siegel on action movies. And then one Destry is George Marshall, who directed the original James Stewart one,
Yeah.
and was a did I think he did the Blue Dahlia, which is a Raymond Chandler screenplay, and he did my one of my absolute favorite movies. Do you know this movie, Murder He Says, with Fred McMurray and Helen Walker?
Yes.
I think it's maybe the funniest movie ever made. It's certainly in the 1940s. It's hilarious, and it's a Fred McMurray who, yes, he was a good light comedian, but we know him for Double Indemnity and a lot of fairly dark
Well,
roles.
see, that's what's interesting to me is that I grew up, I'm the Nick at Night generation. I discovered Fred McMurray through My Three Sons. And then Absent Minded Professor. And I'm like, well, he's a comedic guy. And then you hit Double Indemnity, and you're like, whoa, this is a different thing.
And Pushover, which is with Kim Novak.
Yes. And then you go. So I think was it? I'm trying to remember which came first. If it was Double Indemnity, or is it Remember the Night? What's the one he did with Stanwyck where they go
Remember the
to
Night
her?
was first, and that's a really good movie.
It is really good.
It's a
Yeah.
really good. It's a Christmas movie. Since
Yeah.
I'm into Christmas movies, but he's also in The Apartment in a
Yes.
pretty dark part.
Yes.
Um, yeah. So I am a bit of a movie. I
Yeah.
love movies. I just love and it's been I don't read much fiction anymore. I do read some, but I really don't read in my genre that much because I'm a bit of a mimic, and I gets in. I can if I read Elmore Leonard, I'll start writing like Elmore Leonard. Uh, and it really hit me at one point where when I turned from, I would say, fan into strictly pro, I was doing the second Nolan book, which was called Blood Money, which was probably written about the fourth book in, because they weren't all sold in the same order that I wrote them in. But I was reading George V. Higgins, The Friends of Eddie Coyle. Remember
Hmm.
that, which was a great movie with, and he was very quirky in his dialogue. It was good stuff. And I found I'm writing like George V. Higgins. I got it. I can't get this. I can't shake it. So I stopped reading that stuff. I stopped reading that, and I do revisit. I do revisit Hammett, Chandler, Spillane. I was an early advocate of Jim Thompson. Um, I love Rick Stout's Narrow Wolf. Those books are. I don't know if you've ever read those, but
I haven't. No.
those are worth it because he did as good a first person really as anybody, almost with the possible exception of Chandler. But I mean it. They're if you ever saw the A&E that had Tim Hutton in it,
Hmm.
that's pretty good accurate
Okay.
what those are like. But they're first person, the first person mysteries, and they're just a wonderful place to go.
Can you still read Donald Westlake, or
I
do
had
you?
read everything because he was the last big influence on me,
Yeah.
and I did keep reading him. Well, that when I said I stopped reading contemporaries, I kept reading Westlake, Mickey once in a while published something. I always read Ed McBain. 87th Precinct Mysteries.
Hmm.
Those are fabulous. So, um, anybody I have been it's funny, anybody I've been reading as a fan, I kept reading. They'd already had their way with me.
Got their hooks in you. Yeah, that's interesting. Because the reason I was asking is so many of the like Westlake, Charles at Hard Case Crime has published new Westlake, and I was, well, have you read those? So you have,
Well, I
you've
found one of them. The one, the comedy is finished
you
with.
found it?
Yeah, well, I didn't find it. He had given it to me. We were pretty close. He was he. Not too many people can say the Donald Westlake, Mickey Spillane, and Richard Yates, author of Revolutionary Road, were their mentors.
Well,
But I can claim that, and it's actually has the benefit of being true. Uh, the the thing about Westlake is he he was not selling that book. Nobody was buying it. And again, you can be Donald E. Westlake and get rejected. You just can. And so he sent it to me and he said, "See what you think." And I said, "I think the ending is wrong. You think you needed a little bit of something on there." He said, "Well, you do something with it. You finish it, and we'll do something with it down the road." And I don't. I did actually. The book as published has the last page is something I that was written by me. I don't think I don't know if Charles even knows that, but
let's not tell him.
I did that, and I think I sent it. I think I photocopied it and sent it back to Don, and he never did anything with it. And then I had it. I had that copy, the copy he had sent me with my last page in it, and I told Charles, I said, I have one of these, and it's a good book. It basically is Bob Hope gets kidnapped. And oh, I know, I'm remembering now. He pulled it off the market because, and I don't remember whether after I did my little rewrite or after he had some difficulty selling it. He thought it was too much like King of Comedy. King of Comedy came out, and he said, if I publish this, they're going to say I'm imitating King of Comedy, which also tells you when this was. So you said you had some questions for me. What haven't I answered?
Wow. I mean, this was great. Let's sell some books. You know, by the way, we didn't even, you've referenced Road to Perdition a few times. Incredible story, first of all, incredible film adaptation. And if people aren't familiar with you, I mean, I hope most people are, but in case they're not, it's a good place to start, right? I mean, I know you love Road to Perdition.
Well, I'll give you another anecdote because I
Okay.
got a million of them. Um, so the first after I got fired from Dick Tracy, there I went to the WonderCon in Oakland, and I don't remember the sequence exactly, but it was shortly after I got fired from Dick Tracy. It was 1993, and an editor there um, contacted me and said, "Would you? I want to have a meeting with you." And so I met with him, and he said, "We are going to start a line called Vertigo, one of my favorite movies." So that was a good sign right there. Uh, we're going to we're going to do a series of graphic novels that are that are all noir. And you right now, this was true at the moment, it isn't now. You're the only publishing mystery writer who also writes comics. We want you to do one. And do you have any ideas? And often I've been watching a lot of Lone Wolf and Cub movies with my son Nathan. And I've been watching a lot of John Woo movies, and I had done research on the gangster John Looney and his son Connor in Rock Island with the thought of doing something with it. It had actually been something I had turned up in the research for my first book, first Nathan Heller book, True Detective. And it had kind of hadn't made the cut, or it's only in there a little bit. So anyway, the editor said, do you have any ideas? And I said, well, I, I said, are you familiar with Lone Wolf and Cub? And he said, yes. I said, well, I want to do a version of, I want to do an homage to that, basically. And this is just me just talking off the top of my head. I do that in as 30s gangsters, and because it'll be the same. The Godfather is the same as the Shogun, and and they can travel in their flivver and all this stuff, and it'll be cool. And I was going to call it Gun and Son, which I still think is a good title, but he thought it was a terrible title. So you need to come up with something else. I said, okay. And I also had been thinking, I also had this stuff about John Looney and his son. So I said, and the Godfather will have a crazy son. So I basically kind of gave him a elevator pitch spontaneously. And he said, yeah, let's do this. We'll do this. Because the first thing he said to me was he wanted something like Nathan Heller. And of course, Nathan Heller, private eye in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, who deals with real crimes that are controversially unsolved or solved. And yeah, that's
this is one of the things I wanted to. I do love that we've tracked this character through multiple decades and seen the changes through his eyes, which is a really cool hook for the reader.
Well, and that was getting some publicity at the time, and I thought, okay, I'll do a Nate Heller graphic novel for him.
Yeah.
And he said, well, we want something like Nathan Heller, but we want something new because it's DC and we want our own stuff. So that's when I just sort of spontaneously riffed on on what would become Road to Perdition.
Mm-hmm. Gun and Son.
So I came up with the title Road to Perdition, and I wrote probably some kind of synopsis or something. So he said, I have this really great artist in England, Richard Piers Rayner, and he's wonderful, but I have to warn you, he's slow. I said, I don't care. I mean, I'm not doing anything else. So and I saw his work, and the work is just like phenomenal. So what do I do? He said, well, give me 25 pages. So I wrote 25 pages. So what was going to be a 300-page graphic novel. So over the next, I don't know, 3 years, 4 years, I would get the occasional phone call from this editor saying, I need more pages. And then I would go like, more pages of what? And then he'd say, Road to Perdition. I go, oh yeah. And then I'd write another 25, 30 pages, send it in.
So you're writing this kind of piecemeal. Did you know where it was going? Had you kind of mapped it out ahead of time?
That's almost another story, because we were supposed to do three 300-page books, which was a great gig. I mean, for a writer to say, I got 900 pages they're going to pay me to write.
Right.
And after I turned in what became the second section of 3, because they were going to publish them as individual books. Each section was an individual book of 100 pages. And then it would be collected, and then I'd start another one. That was the plan. That was a grandiose plan that didn't go. So after the second book was turned in, nothing had been published yet. He said, we've been canceled. The line has been canceled. So you've got to finish it. So then I came up with what the last increment was, which is pretty much what I had intended to do at the end of the 900 pages. Because I was going to do the father and son on the road, having these kind of like The Fugitive, having these adventures with the mob guys chasing them and the law chasing them, and do that shtick. And I ended up, after the movie came out, doing another increment of them called On the Road to Perdition 2. And so we did eventually do something with it. But this thing went on for, I don't know, 5 years or something. And the work was just stunning. If you've seen the book, you know what it's like. It's great. And so when we finished and turned it in, the editor told me they're not going to publish it. the line is over, the line is dead, and it just there's no format that DC has that it fits into. You're going to be paid, don't worry about it. And I said, but this is the best thing I ever did in comics. I mean, I've been doing comics since 1977, and this is the thing I'm most proud of. And so I called Paul Levitz, who was the head of DC at the time. You, as a comics person, you probably know that name.
Legion of Superheroes.
Good writer. And so I said, Paul, and we knew each other a little bit, but he didn't have, I mean, we weren't buddies. I said, please take a look at Road to Perdition and see if you can't think of a way to, you can't justify publishing it, because it's, a lot of work went into it. You guys spent a lot of money on it. And it's the best thing I ever did in comics. God bless him. He did it. He was the publisher. He says, I don't care if the line's over, we're publishing this. And it did okay. I mean, we got some good reviews and it sold fine. And that was 1998. And then in, I guess, 2001, I got the phone call from my agent saying, who's the biggest star in Hollywood right now? And I said, I don't know, Bruce Willis. He said, no, Tom Hanks. He's going to star in your movie. What movie is that? Road to Perdition. And then, then there'd be like, the next day I'd get the phone call. I'd be like, you know who else is in it? Paul Newman. Right. Okay, fine. And then the next day I'd get a phone call to be like, who won the Academy Award for Best Directing last year? I said, Sam Mendes for American Beauty, right? He said, yes. And he's going to direct Road to Perdition. And then it was the Jude Law phone call. And of course, Daniel Craig wasn't anybody yet, but
Yeah.
he turned out
But
to
he
be
would
James Bond.
be.
He
Right.
turned out to be James Bond. So and then this amazing cast is put together. And what can I say? I mean, these things happen once in a lifetime if you're lucky. And I got to go to the set, and I got to talk to everybody, hang out with and we went to I think 3 premieres, one in England, and I mean it was it was the one brief shining moment, you know. And,
No.
and then meanwhile it's back to Muscatine, Iowa, and eating at the diner. What can I say?
So I have to ask you this: as someone who has been you've adapted many stories
Yeah.
from screenplays into a novel. How does it feel to see your source material adapted into a film?
Well,
Is
they
it
did a
hard?
great job. They did a really great job, and they solved some of the problems that I would have had to solve if they'd let me write it, which was that it was very episodic, and they had to give it more of a through line. And they really did that with Jude Law because he's not a character in the graphic novel. There are a succession of hitmen that follow them because there were three episodes basically.
Right.
So I think they did a really good job on that. I think that Mendes used a British writer to do a rewrite on David Self's screenplay, an uncredited rewrite, and I thought some of the dialogue sounded a little British to me, and that was just a little writerly, but the movie is terrific, and some of my dialogue is in there, which is nice because
Yeah.
the Self was very faithful to my graphic novel, almost too faithful, and that can happen with adaptations. I think I have a different attitude toward adaptations of my stuff than some people do because I'm very fussy about my stuff, about my book. But if somebody gives me money to make a movie out of it or something, God bless you. If you need my help, let me know. I mean, and then I can enjoy it on its, like the Quarry series really lacks the humor of the books, which is to me very key. But taken on its own terms, it's a good piece of work. And it's funny because I would sit there watching it, and I'd be watching with my wife, and I would say, "This doesn't really have much to do with anything I ever wrote." And then the next thing would be like an exchange of dialogue right out of one of my books. And I go, "Never mind." But but it reminds me of James M. Cain when he was interviewed once, And he had some wonderful movies made out of his books. I mean, Postman on His Drinks Twice, Double Indemnity. Are you kidding me? And somebody interviewing him said, "What? How do you feel about what they've done to your books?" And he's sitting in his study. He says, "They didn't do anything to my books. There they all are." And that's true. It it leads people to your books when you have an adaptation. I mean, I wouldn't have done Nolan if I hadn't have read Don Lee Westlake's Richard Stark novels about Parker, which I started reading because of Point Blank, the movie Point Blank. But I always was somebody led to the source material when I watched movies. If I saw a movie was based on a novel, if I liked that movie at all, I'd have to read the novel.
Yeah.
As a little kid, I had to. I mean, I was 8 years old reading Topper by Thorne Smith.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm sure I understood maybe a tenth of it,
You were
but
reading Topper and you were watching those gritty Bud Bedecker movies at the cinema. He's just being blasted by all this hard hitting storytelling as a very young kid.
I owe it all to my mom because she read me Edgar Rice Burroughs' Tarzan the Forbidden City, Tarzan in the City of Gold, and she turned me on to Dick Tracy when I was 7 years old. Now, Dick Tracy in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, which is the stuff they were reprinting in the comic
Right.
books, never been a more violent comic strip.
Mm-hmm. It's like
He liked to go,
headshots and stuff.
yeah,
Yeah.
and the bullet would come twirling out with blood
Yeah.
and gore, and she,
Made you who you are.
well, yeah, and I have a letter in the other room where she wrote, my mom wrote Chester Gould, the creator of Dick Tracy, and sent him some drawings I had done of Dick Tracy because I wanted to be a cartoonist. And he wrote me a letter with a drawing of Dick Tracy. Like I say, it's on the wall over here. And said, you draw my picture better than anybody your age in the country. Happy birthday, happy 8th birthday, Dick Tracy and Chester Gould, with that Chester Gould signature. I'm 8 years old. My fate was sealed.
Yeah.
My fate was sealed. It's like I say, I think my engine is enthusiasm. That's what's always kept me going.
That's a good through line here because you started talking about enthusiasm and making your own opportunities is what it comes down to. You do not accept no. You find a way to do what you want to do.
I want to show something off because I am a physical media collector,
Okay.
just like you, trying not to be absorbed by our collections.
Exactly.
So the Sting is a movie that Richard Zanuck, who produced Road to Perdition, produced. So I ordered all of the Universal. You have these Universal. Yeah, okay, and,
Yeah.
and they've done The Big Lebowski, and It Came from
Yep.
Outer Space. And okay, I want to show you something. This is absolutely just something that happened. This
Okay.
was not done to me because I'm a special human being. First of all, I'm not a special human being. But second of all, I want to show you what was in my. See, this is what was in my.
Whoa! You got number one.
Do you even believe that?
But you know what, Max? Mine's number one too.
No, it isn't.
No,
It isn't. Show them yours.
I have number 2300.
Okay. Well, we have zeros in common,
Yeah.
and I want you to know that I'm not stingy. If there's some huge Sting fan out here that wants this, just you can have it for free. Just send me $1,000 postage, and I will put it in the mail to you.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
$1,000.
don't give that away. Hang on to that.
I don't even know if I want to give it away for 1,000.
No, hold it.
My son's the one who opened the package, and he said, "What you did? Are they all number one?"
It's just a joke. Just make everybody feel
Have you ever
special.
seen a number one on any one of these?
No,
No,
no.
I've never seen one. So
And it's a thing in fandom too. Like if your number is lower, it's apparently more appealing. I get. I mean, I get like one is of course a big deal, but some people are like, I got number 86. Like, okay, okay, good, good for you, man.
Well, and here's the thing that is the secret message about physical media, and the one that we all who love physical media and love the box sets and love have to keep in mind. I have number one this thing. The movie is no better or no worse because I have number one. If this when you're collecting these boxes and you don't even like the movie, you need help. You need help. And I have that same problem because I love this stuff. And the box sets that they're putting out now are, let's face it, amazing.
But you said it. They're not baseball cards.
They're becoming baseball cards.
Yeah, they are.
They're becoming, and and when we, that's one of the things I really do. I'm gonna blow a little smoke up your skirt, Heath. You
Ooh,
love movie. You love movies,
I do. Yeah.
and that's clear. And some people love collecting. I'll go with the movie lover every time.
Yeah. That's nice of you to say. I also love books, especially books written by you
Well, that's
and
nice.
films made by you. Let's reference, we're gonna wind this down. Look, we gotta do this again. This has got to be like one of
Oh,
a series of conversations. So, Too Many Bullets is the newest one, right? This is the newest hard case crime novel that's hitting shelves, digital or physical, everywhere.
yeah, and it's about the Robert Kennedy assassination because
It,
again, what the Heller books do, I take a crime, a famous crime that's either been solved controversially, like did the guy who was executed for the Limber kidnapping really pull the kidnapping, that kind of thing, or is just flat out unsolved but famous. Uh, or is a mystery like Amelia Earhart or Roswell, or that you can wrap a mystery story around. But I researched them as if I were going to do the definitive nonfiction treatment. Then I write a private eye novel instead. And so Nathan Heller is very much a Philip Marlowe, Mike Hammer, Sam Spade school hard-boiled detective. Where he does vary a little bit is that he ages through the years. So he's in his early 20s at the beginning of the series, and by the time you get to the end, toward the end, he's in his 50s, 60s, and I have found that to be kind of an interesting way to approach these characters. You mentioned Quarry. We've got a Quarry book coming out in December. I think it's December, called Quarry's Return, and Quarry is 71 years old in it, which is very interesting because
are
I've
you
always
writing what you know?
writing what I know. He had open heart surgery too. So, because I do think if you find somebody who's writing a series, somebody like Robert B. Parker or whoever is writing a first person private eye or amateur sleuth series, these are hidden autobiographies. They're metaphorical autobiographies.
Yeah.
What's going on in their lives as they read. Because what else do you have to draw from? If you don't draw from your life and what you observe, you're just drawing from other books. And I didn't. I had written, I think, 3 or 4 books in high school. And my God bless my parents. They let me. They would let me not get a job in the summer if I wrote. So they subsidized me, and they kept my allowance going. I got my $1.50. That's how. That's now you can figure out how old I am because that was my allowance was $1.50. But I would write the book during the summer, and I would during the school year I would try to market it, and of course I wouldn't ever sell it. But by the time I got to college, I'd written 4 books, so I used a lot. But those books were from books. Okay, they were not from my life. They were not from my
Right.
observation. They were not from my generation. And one of the first things I did in like Bait Money and those early books, they were about they were about that era. They were about the late 60s, early 70s. Also writing about my part of the country. I write a lot about Iowa and Illinois because that's where I live.
Yeah.
And when I started out, they almost virtually told you, well, you should be writing about New York or LA. Last time I
Yeah.
looked, you could do crime anywhere. And we have a rich heritage in Iowa and Illinois and the Midwest of the outlaws,
That's right.
plus the Capone gang. I mean, I was always was as a kid fascinated by Wyatt Earp and Elliot Ness.
We didn't even talk about Elliot Ness. Okay, hold on. We got to talk about Elliot Ness because you've done a ton
Yeah.
with Ness.
Well, I was fascinated by the fact that the very first thing they did with Elliot Ness was they based a two-parter on Desilu Playhouse, based on his book about Capone. And it was one of those things where lightning struck. It was like everybody was talking about that series. Every school kid was talking about it. So right away, they started doing the Untouchables TV show, and they did a combination of doing real for a long time anyway. They did a combination of doing real criminals. They used Frank Nitti a lot from the Capone mob, but they would do Mad Dog Call and you just a ton of the real criminals, real gangsters, the real mob guys, and but Ness was not involved in real life with hardly any of them. So it was this weird combination of they're doing reality stuff with turning Elliot Ness basically into Dick Tracy. And of course, Dick Tracy was actually based on Elliot Ness, which is something I found out by questioning Chester Gould.
Wow.
But Elliot Ness became kind of like very similar to Wyatt Earp, and they became in our culture two hot button subjects because there were all kinds of books and things done saying, well, Elliot Ness wasn't a big deal, Wyatt Earp wasn't really a big deal, and so there's a lot of revisionist history about those two. And what happens is it they overreacted to how famous they got in the culture, and you could forget what they really did. And Ness had a very interesting life, a lot of it not in Chicago, most of it in Cleveland, and of course, uh, Wyatt Earp had a extremely interesting life and was involved in all kinds of stuff. So I wrote about him in a book called Black Hats. So I always had kind of a fascination for who were the historical figures that fed our popular culture. Definitely, Wyatt Earp fed the lawman, the Western lawman.
Mhm.
I'm not sure what figure, and you might have an idea what figure, cowboy figure, would have fed the cowboy image, because that's a separate thing from the lawman. The lawman is really an urban, even though it's a little town, maybe Dodge City, but it's still urban.
Mhm.
But the cowboy, the Red River kind of thing, that's a different kind of hero.
Yeah.
So, but definitely Wyatt Earp fed that myth, and definitely Elliot Ness fed the the crime besting. Now, who's a more famous real life detective in American history than Elliot Ness?
What do you think about the De Palma film?
Well, De Palma is one of my favorite filmmakers, um, and I think the film is very watchable. But I think the Mamet script is horrible. I was actually offered the Mamet script to novelize it, and it was with a company that I had two books already written that hadn't been published yet, but they had bought about Elliot Ness in Cleveland in his years as the police commissioner, essentially the public safety director of Cleveland. And they said, if you would novelize that, because I was doing the novelizations at the time, if you would do the novel of the Untouchables movie, we could tie it all in. And I should have, but I didn't, because I didn't like the script, and I couldn't see how I could take this incredibly inaccurate script, turn it into a novel that would lead into my very accurate Elliot Ness novels. So if I had it over again, I'd probably just do it as a commercial thing that would help the other two books. But it's a terrible script. I mean, it has a couple of really good lines in it. The thing about that's the Chicago way. That's a great little speech. But he also has Mounties chasing bootleggers when you went to Canada because it was legal in Canada. So why are the Mounties chasing bootleggers? He also changed, and he changed juries in the middle of a trial. Now, historically, the juries were switched, but at the beginning of the trial, how do you change a jury in the middle of a trial? You can't. You have to start over. So anyway, it was sloppy. And on the last page of the script, it said, that Elliot Ness Elliot Ness died, and then there was like a line and then an asterisk. Have somebody look this up. And I'm like, how much are you getting paid for doing this script? I hated it. I hated the script. But De Palma kind of doesn't know how to make an uninteresting movie. I love Phantom of the Paradise, for example.
Yeah.
I love Obsession. I love Carrie. I mean, he was and is a great filmmaker. So, but you said it earlier, story counts.
You've given me a lot to think about here because I love The Untouchables. But I think what
I
I
own it.
respond,
I own it. I like it as a movie.
what I love about it is the visual language of it
Oh
and
yeah.
the grandeur. I mean, just think about the last shot of the movie is they walk out, they're on the street, and then it's like this big crane shot that just looks, just ascends into the sky of Chicago. It's got a lot of mythological, larger
See,
than life.
I can't watch him. I can't watch Ness throw Frank Nitti off a roof.
Yeah.
That that's a bridge too far for me.
See, you have all this knowledge about the source, about the truth that I don't have.
And that's the problem. That's the thing I do resent is when a movie rewrites the history and misinforms people,
Mm-hmm.
because there was plenty of good stuff to do with Frank Nitti that you didn't have to make stuff up. That's a lazy screenplay. That's a guy who was asked to write an Untouchables screenplay, and he just wrote one. And it has good stuff in it. I mean, that speech that Sean Connery gives is a honey. I'd love to have written that speech. The speech I'm talking about. He, you
Yeah.
know, forget exactly what the cadence is, but it ends up with saying it's the Chicago way. So
It's one of the most quotable movies of the 1980s. You've done your duty, go home and sleep well. And then,
yeah.
what are you prepared to do? And then, yeah. And then the whole scene,
And remember,
the
I was looking at the screenplay, not the movie,
yeah,
because what they
yeah,
don't know about novelizers is we never saw the movie till we went to the movie. And I mean, till the book was out,
right.
because the book and the movie are going to be out at the same time.
And you might be working from a much earlier version of the screenplay too,
Yeah, a
which
few
can be
times.
cool because it ends up giving us a glimpse at something that never made it to screen. In some cases, you're getting scenes that were never in the final film. Um, which is one of the attractions of a novelization in the
Right.
first place. That's what brings us to them. Yeah. But I hear what you're saying about, that's my problem with Elvis, the Baz Luhrmann Elvis movie, is that it's largely just a work of fiction. They've kind of they've turned Elvis into a superhero, essentially. And and I did a video about it here, and somebody was like, "Yeah, but a lot of it's true. Like the scene, blah blah," and then the name is scene, and I'm like, "No, that didn't happen." And they're like, "Well, yeah, but when he was so moved by, I think it's the assassination of Robert Kennedy, um, and he goes, and then he writes or he performs, If I Can Dream." I'm like, "No, that's not how that happened either. You know too much to enjoy the thing. Your knowledge becomes a barrier to the enjoyment."
Well, that's a fascinating topic because I don't know where I land on it. I mean, there's part of me that knows because it's like I was saying earlier about an adaptation of my work. I want to take it on its own terms. I try
Mm-hmm.
not to bring that baggage along.
Yeah.
So it's a tough one because the Baz Luhrmann movie is a very entertaining movie, but it's not terribly accurate. Is that our problem, or is it because it sure worked on a lot of people, and the
It sure did. Yeah.
Untouchables works on a lot of people,
Yeah.
but yeah.
You know what else needs to work on a lot of people is Mike Hammer's Mickey Spillane, which
Ah,
is available now on Blu-ray. You also get, so first of all, the documentaries are incredible. I told you I watched it without the commentary and then with the commentary, which is great. You also get the full Encore for Murder production with Gary Sandy. It's ones
and
and
I
eights
should
too.
say this, and I'd be very happy for your input. I d- I originally took to VCI just Encore for Murder as a uh, bonus feature. I didn't envision it being brought out separately, but I think that the thinking of that is that it can go out to the audience of people like Radio Spirits who buy the old radio shows, because what it is, and this will be my last anecdote, I promise, but last year I got approached by somebody saying, we want to raise some money for the local art center. That's a good thing. And we thought maybe you could write a Dick Tracy radio show for us. And I indignantly said, well, they fired me off of Dick Tracy, so I don't do Dick Tracy anymore. And did a little diva thing, I suppose. And so then I went home and I thought, they want me to do a play. And I had done these two audio plays with Stacy Keach. And one of them we won the best original script, Audie. And so we had produced them as a play, as a where you got the scripts, the radio show play in both Owensboro, Kentucky, and Clearwater, Florida, with Gary Sandy. Gary being a friend of mine who had been in Mommy's Day. He was one of the leads in my movie Mommy's Day. So frankly, they said to me, they took that, they were glad to have me do the Mike Hammer thing, and so I they said, well, would you contact Gary Sandy? I said, well, Gary's not going to come do a free benefit for the art center in Muscatine. Would you please call him? I said, well, I'll call him. And so I called him and I asked him, and he said yes, because he's a mensch, and so I then went to the first rehearsal. That he wasn't there. I mean, he only came in the last few days. But I went to the first rehearsal and I thought, this is local people, right? But they're
Mhm.
local people who've been involved in theater.
Yeah.
They were good. And I went home to my wife and I said, would you come to the next rehearsal with me? Because I think these people are good. And I want to know if I just want them to be good. Am I, and she's tough, Barb. And we came back and she said, no, they're pretty good. They're pretty good. So so Gary comes down a day early and they start working on it, and we've got the whole production with the big screen in back with scene setting slides, and I said I better shoot this. And so
Yeah.
I called my cinematographer pal, and who I hadn't made a movie with since 2006, and said, "What are you doing this weekend?" And he and I said, let's let this float off into the ether. Let's grab it. And so we grabbed it, and then Chad Bishop, who had been he had actually been the Foley guy on stage, because you want to do that radio thing where you get to see what they're doing to make the sound
Hmm.
effects, because that's, yeah, all of
Yeah,
that
yeah.
stuff. And he is a film editor, and so I said, let's put this together and see what we got. And then again, I'm like, this seems pretty good to me. I think this is kind of entertaining. And so I knew we were doing the expanded. Phil and I were working on the expanded Mike Hammer documentary, and so I thought, well, let's offer it as a special feature. And it's like a 61-minute feature and a 90-minute special feature, but
Hmm.
uh, and people seem to be responding to it really well. I mean, Heath, it's a local cast, and
I know.
they're pretty good.
They are, it's very good. You knew what you were doing when you filmed it because it's got wider appeal. And Gary Sandy's great. Let's just say that. Gary
Oh,
Sandy is fantastic as that character. The voice, right, is the commanding, booming voice. But you're right. The supporting cast is the rest of the cast is really great as well. It does not feel like local.
Amateur Night at Dixie.
I
I
wasn't
hope
I wasn't gonna
not.
say that, but no, it feels like something that. And how, what was the, tell me again how quickly the window for this, like how long did they spend with the material? How quickly did it come together?
Oh, about 4 or 5 days. I
It's
mean,
crazy.
we we shot we shot some. There was two dress rehearsals and a performance, and we shot the stuff on the two dress rehearsals. The first dress rehearsal was very loose, and then and they were sort of in costume for it. So
Mhm.
it's a little bit of a hybrid. It's a little bit acted out.
Yeah.
And again, one of the things we had happen to us was one of the HD cameras went out the last, I think, 10 minutes of the performance, and we used the dress rehearsal, and it was fine. But and then when I was going to do Blue Christmas, that was the door I went in when we were up for a $50,000 grant, which I thought would be enough to make a movie out of Blue Christmas, and then we didn't get it.
Yeah.
And then I was like, well, let's do it anyway. I mean, come on, we can do this. We can. And so, so I initially thought, oh, well, I'll do it as a play, and we'll shoot it just like we did. Actually, I thought, let's do it as a radio play, and I thought, well,
Mhm.
we've done that, and we just dug in and did it as a movie. I'm pretty happy with Blue Christmas. I mean, people seem to. First of all, this again, not to be condescending or patronizing to my fellow indie filmmakers, but if you have a good solid story and your cast doesn't suck, you have a shot at doing something people will like to watch. It's really that simple. And it's you got and people like story. Let's face it. Look at what's behind you, Heath. One story after another story after another story, and most of these never happened. These are all kind of dreams, other people's dreams that you get to access. That's why we
What
love
I
the
tell
art.
people, I say I don't love shiny discs. I love stories. These are the key to the story. It's how I access the story. Story is the thing. The play is the thing, as you said.
Well, I think back to the fact, and this isn't that long ago, at least in terms of my life. I was, I was sitting in a theater that my father did a male chorus, and he directed a male chorus, and they had a annual concert, and he was great, actually, my dad. But I had to go, and I had to go all 3 nights, because that's how my father rolled.
Yeah.
So I was sitting in that audience, and I knew that there was a Lee Van Cleef movie on at 7:30 that night. And so I excused myself, and I went home, and I watched the Lee Van Cleef movie on NBC or whatever, and came back in time for the curtain call and everything. Because in those days, if you didn't see it when they put it on the TV, you had to hope they maybe reran it.
Yeah.
And if you think I didn't stay home from church to see the Maltese Falcon, you don't know me very well. I mean, I would. My parents got wise to it real soon, but I mean, I used to get sick all the time so I could stay home and watch a movie. I mean, any film goer didn't spend their childhood trying to, of my generation, didn't spend their childhood trying to con their parents into letting them stay home from school with a stomach ache, so you could you know, watch the Road to Zanzibar.
You want to tell people about your weekly writing, your website?
Well, yeah, I do. I do an update every week. It appears on Tuesday, and sometimes I just talk about stuff, and sometimes it's me hawking my wares. It just every week I just come in. What do I want to talk about? And uh, and my son does it for me. My son Nathan. Prepare to be impressed. My son Nathan is a Japanese to English translator. He is the translator on the JoJo's Bizarre Adventures manga. He translated Battle Royale. He's the real deal. Very
Wow.
proud of him.
Yeah. Wow. And he was he Mickey Spillane's godson?
Yeah, his godson. Yeah,
Just a little thing there.
yeah. That's that. Yeah, he knew Mickey well. He and Mickey were. It was always fun to see them together because it was two kids. It was two. One of them was bigger, but they were both kids. Mickey Spillane, by the way, was one of the sweetest human beings I have ever met.
Yeah.
And, it's funny that he created the most hard-boiled private detective character. I mean, they all come from my camera. Shaft, Jack Reacher, they all come from my camera because my camera was the first guy who he just shot the bad guys. Just like, you know, I the jury. Mickey put it right in the first title. And I'm not really, I'm not some right-wing lunatic. In fact, the it's always funny that I ended up with my camera because I am actually kind of a squishy liberal, all right? But I spent hours with Mickey, days with Mickey. We never, and think about this in terms of today, we never talked politics. And he knew exactly who I was, and he knew exactly, what my beliefs were, and yet he entrusted me with my camera to finish those books because on the storytelling level, on the artistic and level, we were the same cat. And that says something I wish we could all learn
Yeah.
from. There's so much hate in this country right now. It's very disturbing. Very, very disturbing.
Max Allan Collins, thank you so much. This was a blast.
Keith, I've been a Serial Midnight fan for a long time. And so don't say anything bad about me because I'm probably listening.
Couldn't you listen to that? Couldn't we go for another 2 hours? I've got to have Max Allan Collins back to talk about more stuff. There are so many things that we just kind of touched on because this is an introduction, right? This is, hey, Max Allan Collins did this, and then it's all these touchstones through his career. But we could hone in on any one of them, right? I want to know more about Elliot Ness and the Untouchables. His provocative statements about David Mamet's script for the Untouchables, really controversial. But nobody knows more about the Untouchables or Elliot Ness, I believe, right now. That's alive right now than Max Allan Collins. So that's fascinating to me. I would love to know more about that. there's just so many areas that are ripe for further exploration, and I hope that I do get the opportunity to do that. Here's what you can do. You can support Max Allan Collins in any of his ventures. You can buy the books. Too Many Bullets, brand new, Hard Case Crime. Buy it. Buy that book. Get it digitally. Get it physically. I don't care. Buy the book. Read the book. It's a fantastic book, by the way. I'll tell you a little detail. So that character has, the Nathan Heller character, we've seen him in the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s. He has aged with Max Allan Collins, which is really cool because he's in parts of the book, which takes place in the later 60s. He's reflecting on, I knew that person back in the 1930s. It really gives us this unique window. And it's really well done in a way that maybe aging a character is not always well done. Thinking Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. There's a thing that keeps popping up is that there's a woman in the novel that has Cher eye makeup. And I was like, I think I know exactly what, if you look at Cher in the 60s, she had very unique eye makeup. And it's just a little detail that I love. And being such a student of the 60s, being such a fan of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, this book, you gotta read this book. You also want to check out Encore for Murder. You want to check out the Mickey Spillane doc. Basically, I lined this. If you're watching the video version, I put as many photo cutaways here as I could so that you see exactly what we're talking about. Check out the movies. Check out the Lee Marvin and Bud Bedecker and Randolph Scott and Audie Murphy. And then go check out Max Allan Collins' stuff. Support creators that we care about. Support creators that support Serial at Midnight. There's one thing right there. Also, you can support Serial at Midnight by liking, reviewing, rating, subscribing. Subscribing is so important. I say this consistently, but video-wise, if you watch the YouTube video feed, fewer than half of my YouTube viewers are actually subscribed. Why do I tell you to subscribe? Because the YouTube algorithm shows you what it wants you to see, not what you want to see. So you might be getting something weeks or months or even years after I create it and put it up for you, because that's how the algorithm works. So fight that. Fight the machines by subscribing and then by seeking out what you want to watch, not what's being served to you. And then again, those thumbs ups really do matter. Leaving a comment really matters. But basically, if you subscribe, watch, comment, and give a thumbs up, that's golden. That's so helpful. If you want to take it one step further, there are YouTube memberships for $5 a month. You get exclusive videos. There's a Patreon page for Serial at Midnight where I'm constantly posting new stuff. There's a thriving community around Patreon there. Whatever you can do to support this, to elevate this, I would really, really appreciate it. And we're going to be back here doing this again really soon. I got more exciting conversations already recorded, just waiting to hit. So thank you guys so much. Take care. Until next time, I will catch you later.